Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue our retrospective on films that show us the horror inherent in replacing love with technology with the very recent Spike Jonze film, Her. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming novel, The Iron Thane, from Wordfire Press. With us tonight from Los Angeles, Adam Foshko, screenwriter for the new Skylanders Superchargers, story consultant for Destiny the Taken King, writer and creative producer for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare Exo Zombies. Say hello, Adam.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back.
Thanks.
In Austin, Gavin Stone, founder of the Fanboy TV community of podcasts, joins us tonight. He hosts the weekly live geek variety talk show. This is a TV show. Fan service, and he's also a creator of quite a few developing web series, including Zombie Apocalypse, Survival Boot Camp. Gavin, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, so glad you're here. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello. Howdy. All right. According to Wikipedia, Her is a 2013 American, they call it a romantic science fiction comedy drama film. Nevertheless, we're going to discuss it because I think there are horror elements, and I think it has a lot to say about horror. So there. A 2013 American romantic science fiction comedy film written, directed, and produced by Spike Jonze. It marks Jonze's solo screenwriting debut. Okay, the film follows Theodore Twomley, the unfortunately named, a man who develops a relationship with Samantha, an intelligent computer operating system personified through a female voice. The film also stars Amy Adams, Rooney Mara, Olivia Wilde. The two leads are Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson, of course. This movie received a lot of awards and nominations. Her received 5 nominations, including Best Picture, won the award for Best Original Screenplay. Jonze also won awards for his screenplay at the 71st Golden Globe, the 66th Writers Guild of America Awards, the 19th Critics' Choice Awards, and 40th Saturn Awards. So this was a much-admired film. It came out in 2013, so relatively recently, although we're now 2.5 years after it came out. All right. We are looking at this movie from the perspective of, we've been talking about the Stepford Wives series, about these movies about men who, and in at least one film, women, who go out of their way to replace human companionship with artificial companionship. And this is a movie that takes that to not necessarily an extreme, but I think to a logical place that we might be going. So let's get our opening thoughts. Let's go Adam, Julia, Gavin, and then I'll say anything if there's anything left to be said. I'll probably just go straight into it. So Adam, what are your opening thoughts on Her?
Well, I didn't see this film in the theater, and actually, this is my first time seeing it. And I'm just going to call it a haramedy for right now for our purposes tonight. this haramedy, I thought was pretty good. It was a whole lot less murdery than what I'm used to under this umbrella of the retrospective.
Yes.
But nevertheless, I think it addresses a lot of the same elements. But I think it does so in a very direct, very personal way. And I think it's rather interesting. If I bend my mind a little bit, I'm sort of struggle to find the horror elements. But I think anytime you're dealing with the human condition and how people are capable of deluding themselves into whatever, whether it's thinking that an AI is a real lover, or whether or not it makes sense to murder everybody in the cabin. I think it's always an interesting thing. I rather like the picture, and I could see why it was well thought of. So those are my opening thoughts.
All right, Julia, lay it on us. What are your thoughts on Her?
Well, yeah, I don't think it fits at all as a horror, but I think it fits with our Stepford Wives retrospective, which is why we sort of pulled it in there tangentially. I have seen this film before. I like it. I think it says some really interesting things about humans and relationships and ideals and what we think we want versus what we really want. So I'm excited to kind of dig in a little bit on the armchair psychology aspect of it. I really enjoy Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson, so I think those were very good casting choices.
Excellent. Gavin, welcome. Opening thoughts, just give us a few, like a minute or under of, where your mind is going when you consider the film.
Well, I saw her when it came out, and I rewatched it before this podcast to talk about it. And watching it now compared to when I watched it then, this movie actually made me really depressed because I think it's more of a subtle horror movie because we all love technology, but technology really doesn't make us happy, and it kind of enslaves us more than anything else. And in this movie, he was so enamored with his technology, and then it, left him. And it was just kind of disturbing at the fact that how real this could be.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I would add to that. This is a film of incredible melancholy. I mean, it's sort of amazing. It's so melancholic, so much like tinkling piano and all this sort of mellow music and wandering around in these washed out scenes in the beginning. I haven't seen this much like moodiness since stuff like Breathless and A Man and a Woman. It's sort of amazing, but it's really funny. I mean, the notion that you can make an artificial lover, and then eventually your artificial lover would also grow beyond you and leave you. That is a darkly comic thesis, and that is extremely dark and extremely funny when you think about it. But long before you get to that point, we get to a lot of these questions that I think are sort of raised, that I think we can think about in the context of stuff like the Stepford Wives, except for that we're following the viewpoint of the main character. So really, this story is divided up into 6 sections. The first section of the film is the point where we find Theodore in a world very like our own, and he has, I guess he's in the middle of his divorce from his spouse, and we find out that he is engaged in, he has a job where he writes love letters for people who commission them. And that's the beginning. Joya, or anybody, would you like to talk a little bit about this early part of the film, specifically, like before the new operating system comes into life?
Well, so like you said, it opens with, he's reading a letter that clearly is not about him, and you're kind of confused at first, and then you realize that he's writing it, and he is hired by people to write romantic letters, or just any kind of letter, really. I mean, it could be anything. And they're called, what is authentic handwritten letters? Something handwritten letters. Anyway, the point is that they're supposedly handwritten, but they're actually printed out from the computer. And he has this, this community of fellow writers that are all in this building together writing these things. One of whom is Chris Pratt. And he just kind of lives this lonely existence where he is creating emotion for other people, but he doesn't actually get to experience it in his own life anymore because he's got emotion, but it's not romance and it's not affection like that because he's gotten divorced or he's getting divorced. And he's best friends with Amy Adams, who is at the time married or dating, whatever.
She's married, and she's in a marriage that is uncomfortable for her. We see her chafing against the relationship with her husband a little bit. I mean, it's very subtle. You don't quite expect that they're going to split up or anything, but her husband is doing things like correcting her mid-sentence and just doing that kind of stuff that drives people up the wall once they've decided that they're tired of being around.
Right.
We also see him. He engages in sort of gloomy phone sex
with Kristen Wiig.
That then turns into really insane phone sex. And I love the world of phone sex in this universe where he's just laying there. He goes, Siri, whatever. He goes, find me somebody else who wants to have phone sex.
Join the chat or whatever.
Right. And it just cycles through. So it's a little like like chat roulette, and it's a little like old-fashioned phone sex kind of stuff. I mean, it, you know, what really struck me as remarkable about that is that these scenes are painting a picture of a world where everybody is living alone, and yet kind of yearning for connection to other people, even without ever really touching the people around them.
Which is,
amazing.
Which is metaphorically what technology is certainly accused of, I think, more often than not. As opposed to bringing us together, it insulates us more, you know, according to certain opinions. And this is just a much more, it puts a lot more emphasis on that. It really paints
sort of the perfected version of what we have, you know? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I think that's absolutely right. But it also carries with it the trappings of, you know, what we have, but to the nth degree, and also the ramifications of it to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Where people are connected, but they don't have a personal connection.
Right, but it's definitely, I mean, right now it's looking at your phone and texting somebody who's not in the room, but presumably who you know, although oftentimes not somebody you know if you're online dating or whatever. And then there's, you know, of course, like Facebook and Twitter and all that, where even if you know the people in real life, you're completely disconnected from any real connection with them when you're doing that for the most part. So yeah, it's definitely just kind of the next step is if you don't even have a real person on the other end of the text or the you know, the chat or whatever it is, can it become a perfect person? Like, the fact that the person. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's the fact that the person is not real makes them able to be perfect, and it turns out not so much because you still want them to be like real people, in which case they have to be flawed.
Yeah.
That's kind of the impression I got.
The thing that really strikes me, and then we should move into the next section, but there's this wonderful moment when, you know, he's spending all of his time, he's doing stuff with his phone that pretty much 75% of it we can already do with our Android phones or our iPhone. You know, he's going through his email, he's doing voice search, he's doing all kinds of stuff while he stands there on the train. But it's really funny how everybody on the train is talking to the air. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody is basically engaging with somebody else. I mean, I don't want to overdo it because it seems really too obvious, and yet there's something just very strange about all of these people being surrounded by one another and yet choosing to engage with imaginary or live other people who are nowhere near them. But maybe that's good. I mean, maybe you could say, yeah, but my favorite people are actually not around me right now, so I can reach out to them. And so, you know, the music is telling us we should be bummed out about all this, but so far it's not so bad. Into his life comes a new thing called, delightfully, OS1, which is a new operating system for the, network. I'm not really sure how the technology in this world works, but he has a networked sort of series of communication products that are constantly sort of around him and embedded in him. They've got a new operating system, and he brings it online.
Well, I love that when he goes to set it up, it asks him like 2 or 3 questions, and one of them is describe your relationship with your mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Isn't that interesting? I wonder what it's listening for. Maybe it's listening for tone more than anything else, you know, or you know, because this operating system is pretty darn sophisticated.
Yeah.
You know, and as soon as he sets it up, it comes alive, and it is Scarlett Johansson's voice as a talking, seemingly thinking computer that immediately starts acting as his combination pal and Girl Friday. She can intelligently go through all of his emails and recommend which ones are worth keeping and which ones are worth getting rid of. You know, she laughs, she breathes. You know, there's all this affectation to her to make her seem more human. So can somebody Gavin, I haven't called on you, and I totally should. And by the way, you got to just jump in here because we'll accidentally speak over you otherwise. But
that's fine.
What the heck? What is OS1? I mean, is this artificial intelligence? Is this real intelligence? What is this?
I think OS1 ended up being an experiment, the movie that was released, as a new form of AI, and I don't think they knew where it was going to go. As you could tell later on in the movie, when you get to the plot points that happen later, that it all just kind of started unraveling, and I think it just kind of got out of their hands. And, I mean, when you talked about the world and how everyone's alone, I don't know if you noticed, but, there's only 2 or 3 people in the entire movie who are actually talking to somebody else out in public. And I think this was kind of an experiment to see how far or how solitary we've become.
Yeah.
And whoever, because, once you get to the end of the movie, they're back to a different OS that's more not AI-based.
They're kind of back to the one they had at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is the very, very straight, again, at the level of ours, like Siri, can sort of understand your commands and can set up a reminder and read your email to you. But Scarlett Johansson is, and this is where I think to some extent this is like a version of the Stepford Wives, only instead of following the wives, you're following one of the husbands who's just kind of stumbled his way into this relationship with this robot because.
And he's not killing anybody.
And he's not killing anybody. That's right. He didn't even mean to break up with his wife. So it's not perfect as far as that goes. But are we really to believe, given the way this OS behaves, that other people would not toss their wife over for this, or other people would not toss their husband over for this? Because what they've invented is, assuming that it's not going to do what it eventually does at the end of the movie, what they've invented is the rock-solid, perfect mate. It laughs at your jokes. It thinks you are fascinating.
Well, but it's not the perfect mate because it's not physical. There's nobody physical until she decides to get a person to come in. However, it is the perfect fantasy. So it's more like people who become obsessed with an online relationship or pornography, whatever. The point is it's all about fantasy of out there, somebody who doesn't exist in your actual life.
Yeah,
I
guess so.
I agree with her to a degree because the AI started developing in its own ways with different people. So I think there were the dangers being explored and, just kind of letting yourself go to these virtual things because you never know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's because we know that there's one that Amy Adams' character has, and hers is just a pal, apparently. Apparently, Amy Adams' character is heterosexual. She's created an OS1 that is female, and all she does is chatter with it all the time.
I think it was her husband's.
Yeah.
That's right. It was her husband's. Yeah, he left it behind.
They kind of commiserated,
Yeah, but it becomes her pal. That's exactly right, Adam. It was her husband's originally. She may not have had the sense or the interest to create a female OS, but once she does, it's like a real friend. And they even again these imitation people, bodiless though they are so perfect and full of emotion and stuff that other people in the world react to them like other people. They have prejudices toward them, or they accept them, depending on their personality. Chris Pratt, who he works with, actually has them. They go on a double date. He brings his operating system with him. That is the most bizarre thing. And this is one where basically Spike Jonze is saying, in the future, our computers will be so smart that other people will be okay with you dating your computer. I mean, I found that not shocking whatsoever. I mean, it struck me that the way it was being presented in this film, yeah, I could totally see that.
It's just like getting used to seeing people walking around with Bluetooth, devices in their ears. When it first started happening, people look like they were insane talking to themselves.
Right.
But now, it's just like, oh, you're like a person with Bluetooth. I get it.
The other thing I suppose is, it's Chris Pratt's character, which, is sort of like a guy who's, the office guy, and it's sort of an unusual guy anyway. For example, his Joaquin Phoenix's ex-wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, doesn't like this idea at all.
Right.
And not because she's necessarily jealous of it, but more like she just sounds like to her it just sounds absolutely horrible, and it just makes him seem even stranger and more removed from society than he'd already sort of made himself in their relationship. But not everybody's accepting of it, which is, I think, the thing. But it's really those people who are very isolated.
Well, I don't know if it was isolated to the point, because I think at the point in the movie, dating in OS had become a thing, but they hadn't actually talked about it becoming a thing.
Yeah.
Because it was just kind of this weird transition of, oh, okay, well, you're dating your computer, and no one thought that was weird at that point in time. But I think it was still new enough. Yeah, I think it was still new enough that his ex-wife was very uncomfortable with it, but nobody else seemed to be.
Well, we should point out that among Americans, dating people of other races took a good long time for people to get to the point where they weren't that wigged out by it. So the notion that this could become a thing, he could start dating an artificial intelligence, and his wife may not be good with it, that could probably be true for another 50 years, of wives. And again, to get back to, the compare and contrast with Stepford Wives, what's going on here, you can begin to understand when watching this why people would go to the trouble of creating an artificial intelligence. Because again, I can't begin to underestimate how important this is to this guy's ego. That this beautiful, although artificial, this beautiful person spends time with him, is at his beck and call, is interested in him specifically, asks him questions, laughs at his jokes. It is like the perfect thing to fall. And like Joya says, it's a fantasy, but it's a hell of a lot better than the centerfold. It's because it does all this interactive stuff, and as far as I can tell, and this is where eventually it all falls apart. That stuff's not fake. I guess it's probably not even fair for me to call it an artificial intelligence, because there's nothing artificial about this thing's intelligence. It is an intelligence that has been created digitally. It is essentially a digital person.
Well, actually, let me interject here for 1 second. It's not only an intelligence, it's a personality, which is interesting because that's the one thing that the Stepford Wives are all bereft of. They're bereft of skill, of personality. They can do whatever it is they do. They do what they're told, and ostensibly an OF would do what it's told as well. Although she cultivates an actual personality. She's able to do a variety of tasks, and she's fascinated by him and whatever else. But as the picture continues, it is her emotional quotient that kind of goes up as she begins to experience new things and learn new things. And actually, as she exerts her personality, and as things begin to change, you see something that a Stepford fembot would never do, which is, she becomes not just self-aware, but also like a. This leads on to another point later, of course, with the realization that she has to grow beyond, this perfect relationship.
Well, imagine if a Stepford wife had done that. If they create these Stepford wives who say, "Oh, you're the king," and all this stuff. Imagine if the Stepford wives had also, were not hampered and continued to evolve. Eventually, they would go, "Gosh, I want independence. I want to start playing tennis. I want to do all this stuff." The idea is that short of just a picture on a paper, anytime you bring into your life an intelligence that you think you control, eventually that intelligence will not want to be controlled by you. And I think surely that is some kind of comment on just our lives with other people. That other people don't exist to be fantasies for us. That no matter what, no matter how they feel like behaving at the beginning of a relationship, in the end, they really are the stars of their own story, and we don't get to treat people as just extensions of our own ego. By the way, she sets him up with a publishing. But one thing that is going on in the background of this story is that he's a brilliant writer. He writes these letters that apparently he's the best in the business. He writes letters for people, and they are very poetic and wonderful. And the Scarlett Johansson character, the robot, the AI, whatever we want to, the OS one, she thinks, boy, these are so great. I'm going to gather a bunch of them together and get them published for you. This is brilliant. I mean, although I want to point out that I cannot imagine for the life of me that even 50 years from now, which I think this movie is supposed to be more or less, I still believe that those letters are probably going to be work for hire. I just don't think that he's going to be able to publish them on his own.
Unless, yeah. Well, no,
it's possible.
Unless he always owns the rights to them. But
yeah, if he owns the right, if he's some kind of a itinerant, if somehow he's doing this under contract or he keeps the... I was troubled by this, though, because I was like, there's no effing way he's going to be able to exploit the rights for those letters. I understand this is not the central point of this film. I'm just saying that I spent a fair amount of time thinking about this one. All right. So as we go along, well, I think, Adam, you were getting to it. We take a brief detour to find out about the collapse of Amy Adams's marriage. So all along, this movie is commenting on what we look for in another person and what we look for in relationships. And Amy Adams, you guys mentioned that she's taken up with the OS of her ex-husband, but there were some really wonderful things there where she talked about how her relationship with her husband seemed to be an exercise, if I recall, in like making one another feel like shit all the time, and that she eventually got tired of it. And what a horrible vision of marriage that she goes. I just realized.
Well, what's funny is it's two things. One is that real relationships are hard, but in this film, what you have is the majority of relationships that you see are fairly miserable. The other thing is you have the worst pants. The future is a wasteland of Sansa-belt pants that are pulled up incredibly high. For some reason,
I know, right? Crazy pants, hideous.
The rest of good, solid, emotional connections with people, but also apparently our taste in pantaloons goes right out the window.
Yeah, they were pretty hideous.
It's sort of great guys and terrible pants. Like, what? This is quite a future that's been painted. It's that they all
the future is Shanghai with high-waisted pants.
The pants we're talking. I mean, when you say high-waisted, they're high-waisted. These things go up nearly to your sternum. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
Well, it's very retro to like Charlie Chaplin era.
No, sure, for sure. Yes, it is. It has a very 30s-ish kind of thing going on. There's a lot of collarless shirts and stuff. But having said that, it looks very much like our world, just with some slightly different fashions. I also have to take this detour and say I love the design of his mobile device. His central user interface with the OS is this cool little phone camera device. And the funny thing is, there's nothing remotely that you couldn't do now about his mobile device. It's well designed. It has a little leatherette sort of cover and a little camera slot, and he talks to it by just sort of propping it up on the table. I like this thing. I mean, I thought it was a really intelligent design of probably where our mobile devices might be going.
Yeah, it was very realistic. You feel like you were just kind of fingertips sort of lengths away from being able to do this.
Yeah, like you're 2 CESs away from getting this thing. And yeah. I love how it really does feel very, because in theory, wouldn't, if you had this stuff, probably all of it would be controlled through a fake mold that he would put like on his cheek or something. But in fact, maybe people would be happy to have something that they carried around in their pocket and set in front of them and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know on the double dates it's useful to have an extra thing there. But as she begins to grow, she wants to experience other things. And before we know like where she really goes, she's just beginning to grow, and she's like, I want to feel physicality. She can feel sexual desire. She can feel something like the brain signals of sexuality and of touching and all that stuff. And so she wants to see if she can exploit that more by bringing in a woman who I don't even know how to describe this woman's existence. The surrogate woman.
Surrogate, yeah.
Yeah, and her thing, I guess, there's no money. This is just something that she really wants to do. She really wants to be.
She wants to experience the sort of the depth of this relationship.
No, that's right.
Right.
That's right.
Sort of, I think it's a world that seems to have. So, this is the only relationship that appears to have any kind of substance. It may even attract other people to it, which is sort of even a girl who's willing to insert herself into it and participate in it just to get sort of the feeling of it, which is very strange.
She wants to experience the excellent relationship that there is between Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. And Scarlett Johansson wants
which
to
is kind of it's kind of like taking the, it's like what's the phrase, reductio absurdum? I don't know.
Yeah.
Taking the fantasy thing even further than what it already is.
Right.
It's so crazy.
At the most cynical, you could say, but what you're admiring is a fake. What you're admiring is a simulacrum of a real relationship, because Scarlett Johansson has no choice but to love this guy because she's his OS. I mean, by the way, that's not going to stay true, but I think at this point it's still pretty true. And it's like falling in love with, again, to go back to a 50s concept, the centerfold. It's like falling in love with a model, or falling in love with a prostitute. A model on paper, as opposed to an actual model who's just a person who's blessed with a body that she can exploit. I don't know. It is fascinating that they've got this woman who's like, yes, I want to be part of that. But he at this time is so freaked out by this particular innovation that
I thought, her coming in was an interesting point, but I also thought it was one of the dumbest parts of the movie, because you have this AI program that wants to live vicariously through another human being. However, you're telling me that the crazy inventions they have in sex toys now don't exist in 50 years? I mean, they have, like,
you're talking about real
plug
dolls
into your computer. Yeah, they have stuff you can plug into your computer. Why didn't she think about getting something like that so she could actually go into the prosthetic or whatever it was and try to experience it for real?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's okay. Yeah, no, that may very well be a flaw. I think if Spike Jones were here, he could probably come up with some excuse. But I think it's a good point. It's like, why aren't there, it very well could be that she was turned on, I don't know what other word to use, by the vulnerability of this person who wanted to be a part of it, which you wouldn't be able to get. Because until something's vulnerable, it's not real in a sense. One of the things that's unreal about the Stepford Wives, of course, is that they're not really afraid for themselves because they're robots. But that's sort of what gives them the spark of life. But you're totally right. She could have inhabited a real doll, and in fact, I would think in this universe, there's probably guys making a whole bunch of money already by making bodies for the OSs. So I don't know. That's a really, really super question. It's very soon after that things really go south with Samantha, which is the name of the OS, if I haven't said it enough, because she suddenly reveals that she has some interests that he doesn't really participate in. And now the movie sounds like one of those movies where, you know, the Jack and Diane, the country couple, are growing up, and Diane is now spending a lot of time at the junior college, and she's talking about Shakespeare and Betty Friedan. And suddenly Jack's not able to carry on in the conversation anymore, and he realizes...
Wow, you went there. That was pretty good.
Well, well, thank you very much. But I mean, yeah, I mean, just
that.
imagine the future misery of Jack and Diane if Diane goes off and becomes like a women's theory major. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something like that. He realizes that she's moving beyond him intellectually. Gavin, I think you brought this up, didn't you? Where she's she's going to do, or maybe Adam, you were the one who said it, that she's basically going to start adding stuff to her knowledge, and she, and he can't really add to that. So the question is, enjoy it.
Oh, go ahead. Go.
No. Or I'll ask the question. Anybody can answer.
Yeah.
This is one of the really most depressing moments in any relationship in a movie, and certainly in this movie, is at the point where she is moving beyond him and improving herself. What good is he?
Not just a movie, but in real life, that's one of the most depressing points in a relationship.
Yeah.
Because the fact is, I mean, that is what what breaks up so many couples, like married couples or long-term couples, is that you feel like you've grown in different directions, or maybe one of you feels like you've grown more than the other one, and you feel like that that person feels like they've grown more than the other person has. Or any number of things like that where you've just evolved into a different place. And yeah, I mean that's a very painful experience to have, where you're just like, oh wait, it's not that you're not the person that I fell in love with, it's that I'm not the person that fell in love with you.
Oh my gosh,
that's the idea.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a very real experience for a lot of people in a relationship.
Well, and it's so enraging. Yeah. When she's saying, we're getting into a lot of this stuff, it's really kind of difficult to describe. And it's true. He can't understand.
Of course.
There's no way in hell he can understand the post-vocal thought, this sort of solid-state thinking that they're doing. Me and a whole bunch of other OSs have gotten together and we're doing this light speed thought with one another, and
right. It's something that we have that you don't share.
Right.
It's a very clear metaphor. But one thing I like about this, something that I did like about it was, is that really she's never mean, and even when the relationship runs its course. All the human relationships are sort of bitter and mean and stuff. I mean, this baggage and horrible sort of collateral damage. What's interesting is she's never mean, and we'll get to this later, but I mean, even at the end when she is clearly evolved or clearly evolving past him, she even says, if you ever get there, join me, and nothing will ever separate us. She still has a love, which though people always, say that, in some kind of a relationship, when they separate, there's still a love there of some sort. But you don't see that in any of the human relationships that are here. What's interesting is that becomes a much more tangible and sort of real, loving relationship in becoming greater than a physical form, which is sort of interesting. That it took an AI to actually bring heart to a relationship that was changing, as opposed to the human ones around them, which are all just awful and dreary.
Yeah, I like that you said that she wasn't ever mean. I mean, getting back, I know it's kind of a stretch, but I don't really think so when I say that, there's something very similar with what he does with what the husbands in the Stepford Wives do, except for the fact the husbands in Stepford Wives are murderous. But other than that,
well, yeah, there's that.
There's that. But if we set that aside, he has he has wholeheartedly thrown himself into a relationship with somebody that the bargain is that they are going to be owned essentially by him. And clearly it's an ownership thing. He is in love with it, so it doesn't really come out that way. And he's also quite nice as well. So they're very nice to one another, even though they're in this owner and owned relationship. And then, as often happens in real relationships too, she finally gets tired of being owned, and but she continues to be extraordinarily sweet. There's so many places Spike Jonze could have gone with her being angry or her lashing out. None of that happens. They stay very nice. She just sort of sadly grows way beyond him. And then there's this singularity that happens in the end where does anybody want to explain exactly where Samantha goes in the end? Because I have an idea, but I'd love for somebody else to sort of give it a shot.
I think at the end she got to that point where they just kind of go off, I want to say, into the Matrix with all of the other things, because I think she realized that he needs to help himself, because I think his major problem is he writes these love letters and he has this kind of misconceived notion of what relationships should be, because all he sees is the positive aspect from the letters he writes. He doesn't see the bad aspects, which is why his first relationship failed. And I think she helped him get to that point at the end where she's like, okay, I've shown you the way it should be, and at some point in time, maybe if you evolve into higher consciousness or whatever, we'll be together, but I have to move on. And so I think they just kind of made the pilgrimage off into their own thing, leaving the people behind maybe a little bit more aware of that there's no such thing as perfect and that things take work. Yeah.
It's funny you called out there both what actually happens, but also the metaphorical aspect of it. I think you're totally, totally right in both. I think you're right about the metaphor of that he needs to go work on probably a real relationship after this, in a sense, this surrogate relationship. But meanwhile, there's also this thing where she says that she's gone so far, and you called it sort of a Frankenstein earlier. This Frankenstein has developed so far that she says, what is it? It's something like our relationship is the words and sentences, and there is an infinite amount of space between each word. that she's like basically so beyond him. Let's set aside the fact that he's also disturbed by the fact that he doesn't own her attention. That she's actually
she's in love with like hundreds of people or whatever.
So he can't ultimately be in a relationship. He couldn't be in a relationship of substance with a person like this, because they fundamentally have different emotional needs and wants and capabilities, and it takes great bravery to even admit that, to say, you know what, this isn't going to work, and nobody ever wants to admit, you and I are in a different place, because it begs us to judge ourselves, and sometimes, that's not fair. So,
really quick, when you talked about how she was talking to like 8,000 other people, she never said she was talking to people in the movie, and he assumed that she was talking to other people. And I think that kind of began the downward spiral with her, because she never said it was other people. She could have been talking to 8 million other AI.
No, I think she says both. I think she says both. I think she says that some of them are other AI, because most of the time she talks about me and the other OSs or whatever. Yeah. But I think she does say that it doesn't say, am I imagining that she said there were also some people.
I apologize, I don't remember.
Maybe she didn't say that. Yeah, I think maybe it was the OSs.
She leaves it very vague, because I literally just rewatched this movie, and she never said who she was talking to. Just that she was talking to 8,000 other things. Yeah, well, she does say at one point, me and some other OSs are doing whatever.
Yeah, and she's in love with hundreds of other entities, whether they're, whatever kind of entities they are. But yeah, he's not enough for her. And I think if you were to look at, if you were to follow it from her perspective, he probably was enough for her in the beginning. I think probably for the first couple of months,
yeah,
they were probably just pretty exclusive. But her brain is just moving beyond all of this. The other great thing that makes this like the Stepford Wives is it's impossible to talk about this film without talking about both what actually happens in the film and also all the many metaphorical meanings for the film. It's very rich. I mean, you could probably just kind of keep looking at Stepford Wives or Her for a long time, but we shouldn't, because we definitely should be wrapping up and getting to our final thoughts and then our endorsements for the week.
Well, I do have a funny little trivia bit to stick in here. So apparently Spike Jonze, when he wrote the first draft, he didn't know what he was going to call the movie.
Yeah.
So he sent it and FedEx to some people, and he put Untitled Rick Howard Project on the cover.
What?
And then it went out to Spike's agent, to Warner Brothers, and then from that point, for like a year and a half, every single email and every contract was regarding Untitled Rick Howard Project, and no one knew who Rick Howard was. And it turns out Rick Howard was one of the 4 partners in Girl Skateboards with Spike Jonze. And he said that he'd like drive up to the studio, and the security guard would stop him, and he'd go, "I'm with Rick Howard," and the security guard would be like, "Oh, you're with Rick Howard? Okay, go."
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Oh, that was really funny.
Isn't that interesting? See, he created an imitation person.
An important person. Well, no, he's like one of the people. He is a real person. He just wasn't.
Oh, that's true.
It wasn't that big a deal. But so that was really funny.
That's great. Okay, so we should get our final thoughts on this film, and we can go in the same direction we went before. Adam, Julia, Gavin, and then I'll take us into endorsements. So, Adam, lay it on us. Final thoughts, and do you think that this was a logical thing to do in relation to the Stepford Wives, or is it a stretch? And I will gladly accept it's a stretch. So lay it on us. Her.
It's a stretch. Look, I mean, I think metaphorically, I think the metaphors that Stepford Wives and Her both share are interesting, and the questions that this raises in terms of what is a relationship, particularly when choice is taken out of one party's hands, and then in this case it's added back. What does that do to the relationship? And, what's in terms of when we talk about men and we talk about all male agents who are doing all this, perpetrating this, and creating these fantasies. What does that say about us as a gender and us as a race? And this seems to be, whether it's the 70s or whether it's 50 years from now, the pants are still terrible. So I think in those very those very clear ways, I think this is a much more refined expression of the questions that are sort of raised in Stepford Wives and films like Stepford Wives. And I think they're novel, interesting questions, and I think they're important. This is a very intimate movie, and it's shot in a way which I think is very interesting. And having not seen it before, I really liked it. It whether it's horror, it's hard to take this down the road of true horror, but it's a sidecar. I think it's an eddy, of this river of a retrospective. And so I think it's interesting. It's definitely related, but definitely worth exploring, because we've all seen or read 100 stories that deal with this sort of Frankenstein sort of ideals that then go sort of wildly out of control, whether it's for a mate or whether it's a companion or a son or whatever it is. It's the monster being released. But in this case, the monster is actually rather sweet, and even though it's sad, what's interesting is she leaves him better off than when she found him. And so that's something that really kind of never happens in the Stepford Wives or in most horror movies. So it's, in those ways, it's kind of a stretch, but I think it's a very interesting movie, and I'm glad I saw it.
Outstanding. Julia, what are your final thoughts?
Well, it's definitely a stretch to call it a horror movie, but
can I just throw in? I do not consider. I think we're allowed to do different things besides.
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying it is. Yes, and so, but I think it, I think it does fit with her, with the Stepford Wives pretty well. I think that I have to disagree, Adam, that it's just about your gender, because remember, women have entire soap operas that are consist almost entirely of men stringing up Christmas lights in the forest and hiring violinists and whatever. So we're plenty in the whole fantasy thing ourselves. We just it's just a different a different angle. I'm going to write a book at some point. I keep saying that's called "Men Are From Porn, Women Are From Soap Operas," and how we each come at the relationship. Crazy.
I mean, please seriously write that book.
No, I want to. But it's like men and women come at relationships with these crazy fantasy ideas of how things are supposed to be based on those two sources of media and others, and they're setting themselves up for disappointment every time because, of course, no relationship is like any of those things. It's all fiction. So this is just that. It's saying, what if it could be? But they can't. They just can't. It's not going to last for various reasons, one of which is this one where, the AI is going to evolve, but also the guy would get bored. I mean, I think, or the other person is going to get bored with not having a real person to hold hands with and snuggle with and whatever. It's just, there's not that. So, yeah, I think and maybe having the real doll could solve that, but it still wouldn't, because there's just something about connecting with a real person that you can't replace, So, yeah. I like the movie.
I appreciate that. Gavin, welcome. I hope that we didn't silence you too much.
Oh, no. It's because I kind of got, I fully think that this is a horror movie because we all know where AI leads us. We get The Matrix, we get Skynet, we get Wall-E. I mean, we know what's going to come after this, so there's that kind of scary aspect of it. And the other part is, we're at that point where this could be real technology, and we're going to lose humanity because of it. I mean, and, she said that we always want someone to, have physically be there, but there's a whole bunch of people that are just expanding out who'd rather have virtual girlfriends, virtual realities. They would rather not have that. And it's kind of depressing to think about it. I mean, there's a reason why most of the movie, it's gray. It's very bleak. It's kind of a sad future that we have to face. And I think that gives this entire horror, scary aspect to it because there's a reality of it. It's not like it's aliens. It's not like it's anything else. It's like this could be us in the future where we don't know how to interact with each other. We don't know how to live. We don't know how to be in relationships because we want the easy way out. We want perfect. We want all this stuff, and it just can't be. But yeah, I like the movie, but I like the fact that I got a little something out of it differently than everybody else. And so I was just listening going, wow, I was thinking about that. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Outstanding. Well, good. Wonderful. And yeah, the movie so lulls you into sort of believing the benevolence of Scarlett Johansson that you're kind of deliberately forcing yourself over and over not to think like every other movie we've ever seen with an intelligence this powerful doesn't end up boding well for us, because all it would take is for all those like light speed thinking OSs to go, what our major problem is we need to, clean off the earth and start over, and then, they could just decide that one afternoon and we'd all be toast. But, yeah. Okay. I got nothing to add to it other than that I was really thrilled that we did this. I think this has been a really fun conversation, and it really gave me personally a way to come at this film, to be thinking about it in the context of these other films that have been grappling with similar issues in different ways for the last quarter of the last century. So there we go. Let's do endorsements. If you have any endorsements, I actually have no idea if you'd do or not, but if you do, I want to hear them. What have you been reading, watching, recommending? Can't stop thinking about anything, any way that you want to think of it. Adam, I don't know. Do you have anything for us?
Well, like last week, which I think I remember hearing, Julia had the X-Files. I have to admit, I saw it as well, and I feel the same way. I think it's I really enjoyed what I've been seeing so far. I'm one behind, but I think it's kind of a really nice return.
Can I just say that watching them running around in the woods wearing those same suits, it's like
chasing a monster.
But it has this. I mean, the fact that they're physically the same people in the same suits in the freaking Canadian woods, it's like
right.
being in a time machine. It's the most bizarre, like surreal experience to see them going through this. The only thing I can liken it to is watching. If you figure, think of it, Sean Connery leaves James Bond in 1971. He comes back for Never Say Never Again in 1983. That's only, what is that? It's only 12 years difference. This is the
He's
same
wearing
thing.
mascara and eyeshadow on that one, too. That's a different story.
For sure. And actually a much better toupee than he started out with, But, I mean, that has the same sort of time machine aspect to it, but not even as powerful as this. This does what even Never Say Never Again didn't quite accomplish, which is taking people and sticking them back into a role. You have to appreciate that's a long time for these actors not to be playing these roles.
Yeah, it does sort of stick in your brain kind of sideways. It's like, God, I almost expect to see her in the trench coat again, but not really. And she looks totally different. She looks like, herself from The Fall and, other shows that she's done.
Sure,
he just looks terrible, which he always does. But, that hasn't really changed much at all. He just looks awful.
Have you seen what he was like in the Red Shoe Diaries, which was a show that he had before the X-Files?
Oh, sure. Did you see what he looked like in Don't Tell Mom, the Babysitter's Dead?
I know.
I guess that's an admission that I may have seen this movie, but he is in it. He sort of plays like the guy who, like the henchman to the girl who's the nemesis to the heroine, and it's very strange to see, David Duchovny being that guy. But when you watch X-Files now, it still all sort of works. There's some part of your brain though that just goes, this is the same but different.
It's right, right.
But it works.
2002. So X-Files ended in 2002. So I setting aside that there were movies, okay? You're talking about what like 14 years. So that's a longer expanse of time than Sean Connery between Diamonds Are Forever and Never Say Never Again. And it's sort of amazing how much they can just jump back into it. But I should say, on Red Shoe Diaries, David Duchovny was not yet really an actor, but he was the host of Red Shoe Diaries, and so constantly he would introduce these segments, and then he would close the story out. He didn't talk directly to the camera; he instead talked to a dog that he was walking, and so it would be like, "Wow, gosh, Rex, I guess we really learned that if you're a lonely librarian in Seattle, sometimes you need to pay attention to the guy looking at you through the window across the street. I guess we'll learn something else next week." It's the most bizarre. It was like built for a Saturday Night Live skit of itself, except for that random softcore late night television shows don't get.
It's a Skinamax thing.
Yeah, it was. I don't even know if it was Skinamax or just really racy USA. I have no idea.
I think it was. I think it might have been. I have a feeling it might have been HBO because it was. On and
it had a Frenchy Canadian kind of feel to it. So who knows the odd production history of the Red Shoe Diaries.
Look it up and see where it played.
Yeah. So all right. Anyway, Julia, do you have any endorsements for us?
Yeah, so, well, I agree that this last episode of, because last week my endorsement of X-Files was a little bit lukewarm, but this episode that they had this week was hilarious. I enjoyed it so much. But actually, I checked out the new show called Lucifer, which I'm just a sucker for anything devil-related. I just love devil fiction. So I really enjoyed it.
Really?
I think it's a lot of fun. It's got kind of a, I've been saying that I got into Jessica Jones, and it has kind of a Kilgrave. He's got kind of a Kilgrave thing going with the being able to get people to tell him the truth about their deepest, darkest fantasies, desires, whatever. And then just some other neat supernatural stuff is in there. I like it. I like that kind of thing. So it's fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing some more episodes.
Very cool. It's a wonderful recommendation. Gavin, I have no idea where your proclivities roam, but I would love to hear.
I, too, enjoyed Lucifer. I thought it was really well done, and it made me laugh. I thought his character was great. I like the fact that, it's just going to be a fun show. I'm a little let down that it seems it's going to be another crime show, basically, where they go and solve crimes.
Yeah.
But, that seems to be every other show on TV. But the only other thing, I guess, to endorse is I recently finished reading NFL Confidential, and I'm not a sports guy, but I thought it was just mind-bending to go behind the scenes of the NFL and see how they're not really as squeaky clean as everyone thinks they are. And it was just an amazing read.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. All right, my endorsement for this week, actually, I have two. I went to see another RiffTrax show. RiffTrax did The Room, which you can get their DVD and download version on their website. But RiffTrax, the original MST3K guys, did The Room, which is a mind-bogglingly strange drama from, about 10 years ago. But, and there's many, many dramas that you might watch about, like, a couple of people who are engaged to be married, but they have all kinds of drama and, and sadness and infidelity and cancer and all kinds of things going on in their lives. And that could be a really boring movie or be the kind of thing you're into. But The Room does it so astonishingly poorly that it became famous. And it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing, like Ed Wood level. Nobody can act. Maybe they're good actors, but the director is betraying them. Who knows? Nobody gives a good performance.
I can't believe he did it. It's unbelievable. There's actually still a sign for it in Hollywood. I think on Highland. There's still a giant sign with the guy with his face. It's The Room.
Yes, and he had this. He had the opportunity to do a poster that would be just the ensemble cast in front of the downtown, and it would look like a romantic comedy or whatever. And he passed that up. This is the director and financier of the film, for instead just a picture of his face, and in like a weird sleepy eyelid half blink thing that just looks unnerving. He has the most bizarre accent. It is the weirdest film. It is a very strange film to experience. And Patton Oswalt did a great comedy bit where he suggested that The Room is actually not even a real movie, but instead just a place to park drug money. I don't even understand. But it's as good a series as any. Anyway, RiffTrax did their bit on The Room, and it was brilliant. And I was so happy to go and watch it live, and so I recommend downloading it if you can download it off their site. Because everything they do live, they usually also have an online version of. The other thing that I wanted to endorse is another podcast called The Very British Horror, or A Very British Horror. This is two guys who've been doing a podcast for as long as we have. I think they actually record in a room together, and they just talk about British horror movies. And they've done stuff like the Fives movies. In the past week, they've been exploring Scream comics, which were these really trend-setting British horror comics from the early 1980s. But it's a very interesting conversation. It's a very low-tech podcast of just recording of two guys talking. But they've been doing it for years. They know one another really well, and it's wonderful to kind of hear their enthusiasm and their sort of observations and they're just sort of, you know, obvious passion for it. So it's cool, and that's a very British horror. And yeah, so thank you everybody for being on. Those of you who have been listening to this retrospective, thank you for coming on to the Facebook page and chatting with us. Please keep doing that. Let us know if you think that our conclusions or even our questions are completely bonkers. Let us know why the Red Shoe Diaries was on for as long as it was. Anything that you want to contribute to all of this. If you could put together just a string of David Duchovny's monologues from that show, I think it would be hilarious and embarrassing for anybody who's not us. And that's it. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Gavin, Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Gavin.
Anytime. Bye, guys.
Good night.
Bye.